Crom Mortis, the Spirit of Halloween. Written and read by Tony Capobianco. Whether it's called Samhain or Halloween, a mysterious phenomenon occurs. The veil between the living and the dead is thinned, and opened are portals to the Otherworld. From sunset on October 31st to sunset on November 1st, mundane reality is transformed. Spirits, fairies, witches, skeletons, vampires, and supernatural beings that mortals once worshipped as gods roam the earth. One supernatural being in particular has haunted the history of Halloween. Many names have been attributed to this frightful phantom. It is known as the Samhain Enforcer, Old Thinny, the Lord of Halloween, and the Spirit of Halloween, but its proper name is Crom Mortis. Throughout the centuries, accounts of encounters with this shape-shifting being on Halloween have been recorded. It is said that some of those who mock and are hostile to the traditions of this magical day don't live to tell the tale of their encounter with the Lord of Halloween. October 31st, 1986. Carrie, a 16-year-old girl, took her younger sister Megan trick-or-treating. Carrie's parents had ordered her to accompany the 11-year-old Megan through the neighborhood. Being a teenager, Carrie had protested. She wanted to go hang out with her friends. The last thing that she wanted to do was to take her kid sister door to door for candy. Their mom couldn't take Megan trick-or-treating that year because she was busy cooking a special Halloween dinner for the family. So it was that it fell to Carrie to look after Megan. The neighborhood had gotten into the Halloween spirit. 1986 was the first year that the small town in the Hudson Valley had really begun to decorate their front porches. Candlelit jack-o'-lanterns were joined by cotton spiderwebs, spooky cardboard witches, and vampires across neighborhood front yards. Some of the houses even played tapes of scary music and haunted sounds. The recorded scary sounds coming from one house included the sounds of a witch cackling while boiling water, a mad scientist ranting, a woman screaming, and a ghost whispering, "Beware." The decorations weren't as elaborate as they would become years later, but it was the start of a new tradition. For Megan, the decorations and scary sounds enhanced the magic of the day. Halloween had always been her favorite holiday. Super enthused, Megan was dressed up as a witch. Just like her biological father, Megan loved to dress up for Halloween. Their dad loved Halloween. In fact, he had loved it so much that he had convinced their mother to have their wedding on Halloween. When the two sisters tragically lost their father to cancer, they were crushed. The sisters dealt with the painful loss differently. While Carrie had grown to associate Halloween with the painful reminder of her father's death, Megan saw Halloween as a special time to make her daddy present again. It was dusk and the autumn air was cool. A breeze, like an unseen ghost, shook orange, red, and yellow leaves from the trees. Blown by the wind, the dead, dried leaves scraped across the road. It sounded like an army of goblins scurrying through the street and sidewalks. "Isn't this rad? Halloween is the best!" Megan exclaimed as they walked down the sidewalk. "Oh yeah, I can't think of anything else that I'd rather be doing," Carrie answered in a monotone voice. "You always act like you're bored, but I think you'll be surprised tonight. Tonight's different. It's not like any of the other nights of the year, said Megan. Yes, you get to pretend you're a mythical fairy tale and overdose on candy. What a blast, Carrie replied dispassionately. You're blinded by adult thinking. You've lost the magic. Don't you remember how good and magical you used to feel when we celebrated Halloween a few years ago? Megan asked as she looked up at her big sister. I was a kid then, but I grew up. You'll understand when you're older, Carrie answered dismissively. No, I won't. Maybe if you open your eyes, you'll see things that will change your mind tonight, Megan replied hopefully. Keep dreaming, Snotnose. The only thing I'll see tonight are little kids marching like ants to bring sugar back to their nests, Carrie responded. Tonight is different. I'm not joking. The veil between the living and the dead is thinner tonight. A ghost could... Having lost her temper, Carrie interrupted Megan before she could complete her sentence. She grabbed her little sister by the arms, shook her, and said, Stop it. Just stop it. You won't see a ghost. There are no such things as spirits. They don't exist. The topic of spirits had triggered Carrie's anger. Calling to mind the fact that she would never see her father again caused her emotions to boil over. Thinking of her deceased father was terribly painful, and Megan's delusional beliefs were like salt being poured onto open wounds. It was more than Carrie could take. Megan cried for a couple of minutes. Afterwards, the sisters walked in silence. The sun had completely gone down. Darkness had fully set in. The only visible lights came from houses and the headlights of passing cars. The sound of a vehicle slowing down was accompanied by the increasing brightness from its headlights. The vehicle, a brown van, stopped beside Carrie and Megan. A man, wearing an expressionless Halloween mask, slid open the side door of the van. Jumping from the van, the stranger violently shoved Carrie to the ground. A moment later, he snatched up Megan, threw her into the van, climbed in behind her, and slammed the door shut. The van was beginning to pull away as Carrie rose back up to her feet. Running as fast as she could and screaming at the top of her lungs, she ran after the van. Her long black hair waved in front of her face. Through strands of her hair, she helplessly watched as the distance between her and the van grew. Her sister had been abducted. She had failed to protect her. Carrie's stomach churned as despair swallowed her whole. Fog rolled in and further obstructed her view of the van. Crying out loud, her arms flapped as she ran. It looked as though she sought to fly like a bird. The fog had rapidly become dense. It had become so thick that Carrie not only lost sight of the van, but she couldn't see more than a few yards from her face. Even so, she kept running. She refused to quit. A jolt of energy went down her spine. To her happy amazement, she saw the taillights which belonged to the van. The van had come to a stop. Screams of terror sounded through the foggy night. Carrie was briefly relieved because the screams did not come from Megan. No, these were the screams of a terrified man. As Carrie approached the van of the abductor, she saw that the driver's side door had been ripped off. Shocked, confused, and afraid, Carrie didn't know what to think as she looked at the driver's side door across the street from the van. There was no evidence of a crash with another car. The sound of heavy footsteps emanated from a man as he frantically ran past Carrie. A moment later, An unearthly humanoid-like creature moved parallel to Carrie. Carrie's jaw dropped as she saw the ghastly figure. It was floating a couple of feet above the ground. Although the fog was dense, she could see that its face was covered by a thin layer of decomposed flesh. The ghoulish face was desiccated. The lines in its thin, leathery skin made the bony skull beneath more pronounced. Carrie had no doubt that that thing was not wearing a mask, and it was definitely not human. Filled with repulsion and fear, her heart thumped like a frightened rabbit. The levitating fiend spun a long, spiked chain above its head. After swinging the chain in a circle several times through the air, it whipped it in the direction that Megan's abductor had run. A painful scream was heard as the sound of the spiked chain impacted the abductor's flesh. The floating fiend then reeled the man in like a fish on a hook. The evil man's body scraped against the pavement as he tried to resist being reeled in. The serial killer of children fought in vain. Like the 18 child victims that he had taken over the years, there was no escape. The sadistic serial killer was in the unshakable grasps of a higher power. The spirit of Halloween picked the killer up off of the ground and glared into his eyes. The spirit of Halloween's empty black eyes filled the man with dread. Pointing his long, bony finger at the serial killer, its eyes changed. Its empty black eyes began to glow with an orange light. Like a jack-o'-lantern, the orange light emanated from its eyes, nose, and mouth. At the same time, a swarm of 3-foot-tall goblins covered the wicked man. Some of the goblins had gray skin, and some had green skin. Armed with sharp claws on their fingers and toes, they sliced the man's skin and then peeled it off of his body. The evil killer screeched and screamed in agony. Resembling a shark, the little goblins had mouths filled with rows of teeth. Apparently hungry, the goblins ravenously ate the peeled-off skin. The serial killer of children had been stripped of all his skin. All that remained were the layers of bloody flesh and fat. Only then did the Lord of Halloween end the sinister killer's life. Crom Mortis ripped the man's head from his body and threw it into a drainage ditch. The spirit of Halloween then imprisoned the soul of the dead man in a black box once it separated from its body. The fearsome goblin scattered away into the foggy night. Crom Mortis, the Lord of Halloween, floated towards Megan. Megan had watched the whole gruesome scene as she stood on the side of the road. Carrie's heart beat faster as she said, "Megan, no! Get away from that thing! Run!" "Don't be afraid, Carrie. It's okay now," Megan replied with a surreal calmness. Okay. This is a flipping far cry away from okay, Carrie remarked as she put her hands on her head. "Thank you, Crom Mortis, Lord of Halloween. I just knew that you would come. You answered my prayer for help and you saved my life," Megan said as she knelt before the floating being. "You are a faithful believer. I always hear the prayers of those who keep my spirit. That vile man, however, did not honor my spirit, and he broke the rules. Dead, without his head, his ghost will be filled with dread. Crom Mortis explained. Stunned and speechless, Carrie trembled as she looked on and listened. Carrie, as for you, regain your Halloween spirit. Spooky season isn't just for children. It's a time of magic, wonder, fear, and darkness. Honor my spirit. Don't ever try to destroy Halloween, because if you do, I may return as your enemy, Crom Mortis said as he floated away. Carrie ran to Megan and hugged her tighter than she ever had before. Turning around, Crom Mortis said, "Oh, I have one more gift for you. There's someone who would like to say hello to you. Happy Halloween." The spirit of Carrie and Megan's father appeared from the fog and walked over to his precious girls. The spirit of Halloween even permitted that he go home with them to see his beloved wife. For a few precious hours, the girls were reunited with their beloved daddy, and they got to be together one more time on this side of the veil. That Halloween night was a priceless gift. Knowing that her father still lived on apart from his body soothed Carrie's heart and mind. Forevermore would she enthusiastically honor Halloween. Samhain, 891. In the 9th century, Pope Gregory IV extended the celebration of the Feast of All Saints' Day on November 1st to the entire Catholic Church. Many scholars believe that the Pope moved the Feast of All Saints' Day to November 1st to combat the Celtic celebration of Samhain. Whatever the intentions of Pope Gregory IV may have been, the festival of Samhain eventually disappeared. Believing that pagan practices and religions were demonic, Catholic clergy zealously fought against them. A Catholic priest preached on the evils of Samhain. He exhorted the people to repent and believe in the gospel if they wanted to receive life eternal. Equating Celtic religion and traditions with the devil, he warned all who would listen of the spiritual danger of such practices. The zealous priest threatened eternal hellfire for all who stubbornly persisted to celebrate Samhain. With a furious fire burning within, the priest sought to destroy the practice of Samhain and replace it with his preferred Christian feast. The threats of eternal torment and damnation were persuasive psychological threats. On the evening of October 31st, 891, the priest became aware that the people were gathered around a bonfire in revelry. The people were drinking, feasting, and telling stories about the gods and spirits that visited from the Otherworld on that magical night. Witnessing what the simple people were doing and saying, the priest became furious. An unbridled rage had built within him and consumed him. Carrying a crucifix in his right hand, he began imploring God for help. In a blind rage, he knocked alcoholic drinks from people's hands as he screamed about the evil of blasphemy. Frothing at the mouth, he hollered about how the people were communing with Satan and his diabolical demons from hell. He yelled at them and asserted that they would all soon be dragged off to hell by the devils. When a villager laughed at the priest snapped. The clergyman tackled and savagely beat the man who had laughed at him. The villager was too drunk to defend himself, and the priest showed no mercy. Festival goers moved in to save the man from being beaten to death. They pulled the priest off of the helpless man and threw him to the ground. Having had his desired actions temporarily thwarted, the priest grew even more enraged. Kneeling on the ground, he looked around and saw a large stick. Picking the stick up from the ground, he tore off a piece of his clothes and wrapped it around the end of the stick. With his eyes reflecting the flames from the bonfire, he placed the top of the stick in the fire to light it. Once the end of the stick was ablaze, the priest pointed it at the crowd and said, "Since you don't value your souls, and since you want to go to hell, I'll help you. I'll start your hell right here on Earth, and then you can burn eternally with your demons in hell." Unhinged, the priest set a woman on fire and immediately sought to set more people on fire. Suddenly, a thick fog rolled in. The Samhain enforcer appeared before the crowd. Extending his right hand, he extinguished the flames before they had the opportunity to gravely harm the innocent woman. The crowd moaned in amazement. In gratitude, the people fell to their knees and lauded the spirit of Samhain. The priest, however, did not kneel. Instead, he pointed his makeshift torch at the spirit and said, "I don't fear you, demon. You have no power over me. I'll send you back to hell." The frightening figure grinned and replied, "You soon will be afraid. You know nothing of the Otherworld or the real spiritual reality. My name is Crom Mortis, and I'm everything that you have ever been afraid of." Pointing his right index finger at the priest, nearby branches and shrubbery extended and wrapped the cleric up. Immobilized, the clergyman was forced to look on as Crom Mortis shapeshifted into the man's worst nightmares. At one moment, the fiend was a monstrous hybrid of a serpent and a man. A few moments later, he morphed into a hideous witch. Then, he transformed into a horrifying goat man. In the form of the goat man, Crom Mortis set the priest on fire. Once dead, the enforcer of Samhain captured the spirit of the priest and carried him to the Otherworld. Throughout the ages, the spirit of Halloween has haunted this world from sunset on October 31st to sunset on November 1st. This ancient, immortal, supernatural being exacts his unique form of justice as he sees fit. A friend and hero to those who play by his rules and honor his spirit, and a terrifying enemy to those who break his rules and try to extinguish the spirit of Halloween. Crom Mortis rules Halloween and Samhain. Beware of the Lord of Halloween. If you don't believe in him, if you mock him and try to end the celebrations of Halloween and Samhain, Crom Mortis may appear before you and judge you. Crom Mortis, the Lord of Halloween, is watching you. Thanks for stopping by the Haunted Half Moon Inn. I hope that you have enjoyed your stay. Before you go, please put a wooden stake through the like button and leave a comment for the spirits to read. If you did enjoy your time with us, subscribe to this undead channel. Doing those little things really helps me to reach more souls. The world is sick and hurting. It needs more horror. Help me to heal the world through horror. Together, we can haunt this world one home at a time. And always remember, just because you don't see them doesn't mean that they aren't there.